Have you ever noticed how the very thing you give most freely, your kindness, sometimes becomes the reason people treat you with less respect? You offer your time, your patience, your help, believing it will be received with gratitude, yet instead it is met with indifference, even quiet contempt. It cuts deep because you weren't weak, you were generous. But in the eyes of some, what flows without limit is not a gift, but an invitation to take. The Stoics saw this clearly. They warned that virtue without measure can become a chain around your own neck. To give blindly is to forget that dignity must walk beside compassion. A man who bends too often to please others soon loses the root of his own strength. Silence becomes mistaken for submission, and mercy is twisted into weakness. So the question remains, how do you live with kindness, yet not be consumed by it? How do you give without being diminished? Stay with me, and we'll walk into that paradox together, toward a form of kindness that commands both respect and peace. As we step into the first chapter, picture the silence of a monastery at dusk. The air is calm, but beneath it, one disciple carries a storm. He prides himself on being kind. Every gesture, every sacrifice is proof to himself that he's living by the highest teaching. Each day, he takes on more than his share. He carries the loads of others. He gives away his food. He never refuses, no matter how unfair the request. To him, this was strength, and at first, it seemed so. Others admired him, spoke of his generosity, praised his endless patience. He glowed in their approval. But slowly, the tone shifted. Admiration turned to indifference. Indifference turned to exploitation. Those around him left their tasks undone, certain he would complete them. They spoke harshly, knowing he would never fight back. The same kindness that once raised him up now began to strip him down. Imagine the weight of that moment. You give until you are empty, and the very people you serve no longer even see you. No gratitude, no respect, only expectation. What once felt noble begins to feel like chains. One evening, worn and uncertain, the disciple sought his teacher. His voice carried both hurt and desperation. "Master, why does my kindness bring me disrespect? Am I not living by the true path of compassion?" The teacher did not scold. He did not flatter. He smiled with the quiet strength of one who has seen this pattern before. And then he said, "Let me tell you a story." The story was simple but sharp. A river ran through a great forest, clear and generous. It quenched thirst, fed the trees, gave rest to travelers. It turned no one away. Yet, over time, the animals muddied its waters. The travelers left behind waste. Even the trees grew greedy, their roots drinking more than they needed. Slowly, the river darkened, diminished. At last, the river cried, "Why do you treat me so? I gave life to all of you." The forest replied, "Because you set no bounds. We thought you did not mind." Do you feel the sting in that reply? Kindness without boundaries is not seen as virtue. It is mistaken for weakness. Marcus Aurelius once warned, "If you seek applause, you lose yourself. If you give, give with strength. If you must refuse, refuse with reason." True kindness, the kind that endures, must be measured. The disciple heard this, and for the first time saw himself as the river. His endless giving had not inspired respect. It had taught others to take what he believed was noble, had in truth become submission. This is where Stoic clarity enters. Seneca wrote, "He who gives all to others leaves nothing for himself, and he who respects not himself teaches others not to respect him." The point is not to abandon kindness, but to refine it, to make it strong, not soft, to anchor it in dignity, not desperation. Think about your own life. How many times have you stayed silent, thinking it was noble, only to find your silence read as surrender? How many times have you carried burdens that were never yours, telling yourself it was compassion when it was really fear of saying no? The Stoic path is not bitter. It does not call you to harden into cruelty. It calls you to balance, to give without being drained, to help without being diminished, to set limits, not as walls, but as signals. My kindness is a choice, not an obligation. The disciple began to see this. His problem was not kindness itself, but the absence of boundaries. His giving had no roots, so it became hollow. But with roots, self-respect, clarity, wisdom, kindness could be both soft and strong. Like water, which yields yet carves mountains. Here lies the first great turn. If you bend endlessly, you are not admired for your generosity. You are used for it. But if you temper generosity with strength, others must meet you with respect. This was the beginning of his true lesson, a shift from blind giving to wise giving, from being drained to being dignified. And as the master's story faded into silence, the disciple realized his journey had only begun, because the next step would reveal the deeper truth. What happens when the river finally learns to guard its flow? Now imagine stepping deeper into the story. A river cuts through a wide forest, generous and unguarded. Its waters are clear, cool, life-giving. Animals drink freely. Trees root themselves stronger by its side. Travelers rest, refreshed by its flow. The river turns no one away. It seems unshakable, but over time, the picture changes. The animals muddy its waters. Travelers leave their waste behind. The trees, already tall, grow greedy, pulling more than they need. Slowly the river shrinks, its clarity fading into murk. And finally the river cries out, "Why do you treat me this way? I have given you life, yet you exploit me." The forest replies with a truth sharper than any blade. "Because you set no boundaries. We assumed you did not mind." That reply is the heart of the wound. Generosity without measure is not seen as virtue, it is mistaken for weakness. Seneca once wrote, "He who spares all ends by harming all." The river's endless giving was not strength. It was surrender. The disciple, listening, asked, "Then what should the river have done?" The master's words were calm but weighty. The river must learn that kindness without wisdom is like an overflowing cup. Too much without limit breeds imbalance. True kindness requires awareness. It must know when to give and when to withhold, not out of selfishness, but for harmony. Here lies the turning point. To the untrained eye, kindness seems simple. Always say yes, always give. But the Stoics knew better. Epictetus said, "First decide who you would be, and then do what you must do." To give blindly is not virtue, it is self-abandonment. Look inward for a moment. How many times have you poured yourself into others only to feel emptied, unseen? How many times have your yeses, offered in goodwill, taught others only to demand more? In those moments, you were not respected for your kindness. You were consumed by it. The disciple pressed on. "Then should I stop being kind?" The master shook his head. "No, stop being indiscriminately kind. To be truly kind, you must also respect yourself. A kindness that erodes your spirit is not kindness. It is sacrifice that poisons balance. This is not a call to hardness. It is a call to balance." Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." In practice, this means refusing to let compassion twist into servitude, to help when it uplifts, to refuse when it enables decay. Picture this in real life. A co-worker constantly leaves you their undone work. At first you agree, thinking it helps. Soon it becomes expected. You grow bitter, they grow entitled. But the day you calmly say, "No, this is yours to finish," the air changes. They may bristle, yet respect takes root. Because you have shown your time matters. Your kindness is a choice, not a leash. Boundaries are not cruelty. They are clarity. Like night balances day, firmness balances compassion. Water remains soft, yet it carves mountains. So too must your kindness flow with strength beneath its surface. Without it, you drown. With it, you endure. At this stage, the disciple understood. His kindness was not wrong, but it was blind. The river gave until it grew polluted, not because it lacked water, but because it lacked wisdom. Stoic wisdom calls this discernment, knowing what belongs to you to protect and what must be refused. So keep the image of that river, once murky, now guarding its flow. Not to deny life, but to preserve it. Not to harden, but to remain water, clear, strong, enduring. That is the essence of true kindness. The disciple sat in silence, but within, something shifted. His path was no longer about endless yeses. It was about mindful giving, anchored in respect. And he knew, if he learned to bend with measure, he would no longer break. Because the next challenge is greater still, how to carry that balance into the chaos of daily life. Advancing to the third chapter, picture the master leaning forward, his eyes calm yet sharp, as he shares a truth that has endured for centuries. Life, he says, is built on opposites, forces that seem to clash, but in truth hold each other upright. Softness and firmness, giving and guarding. To lean too far on one is to fall. Kindness, he continued, is like water, gentle, nourishing, life-giving. But water without banks floods and destroys. In the same way, kindness without strength collapses into weakness, and strength without compassion decays into cruelty. The key is balance. The disciple, uneasy yet curious, asked, "How do I find that balance?" The master smiled, as if the answer had always been near. Through mindful action. Before you give, pause. Ask yourself, is this act born from strength or from a hunger for approval? Does it lift others, or does it enable their refusal to grow? True kindness uplifts both giver and receiver. Anything else is decay. From here the master set a test. Go into the village, he said, and offer your help. But this time, be watchful. See how people respond. Notice how you feel. Then return to me with what you learn. The disciple obeyed. At first he did as always. He carried loads. He said yes to every request. He poured himself out. But as he walked through the hours, something became clear. Patterns surfaced like shadows at dusk. Some accepted his help with gratitude, eyes soft with respect. Yet others treated his giving as their right, demanding more, as if his kindness belonged to them. And then, in the heat of one such demand, he remembered the master's words. He paused. He breathed. He declined, politely, firmly. To his surprise, something shifted. Some who had looked down on him now met his eyes with respect. They no longer saw a servant. They saw an equal. Not everyone rejoiced. Those who had exploited him grew angry, but he saw through their anger. It was not born of harm. It was born of losing control. This is where the lesson deepened. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." The disciple now saw that the same applied to kindness. If giving corrodes your spirit, it is not kindness. It is surrender. If helping erases your dignity, it is not virtue, it is self-betrayal. Here's where we must stop and reflect. How often have you given, not because it was right, but because you feared rejection? How often has your yes been a shield against conflict rather than an act of real compassion? And in those moments, did your giving strengthen anyone, or did it only weaken you both? The disciple's eyes opened to this truth. For the first time, he understood that respect is not born from endless compliance. Respect is born when kindness stands with backbone, when you help not out of fear, but out of choice, when your giving has roots, not desperation. Seneca warned, "A gift consists not in what is done or given, but in the intention of the giver. A kindness given from weakness creates chains. A kindness given from strength creates harmony." This was no longer theory to the disciple, it was lived experience. He had tasted the anger of those who lost their grip on him, and he had felt the deeper respect of those who now saw him as a man of measure. So here is the edge of the teaching. If you wish your kindness to endure, let it be shaped by reason. Guard it with boundaries. Let your yes be a true yes, and your no be firm, without apology. Because only then does kindness remain what it was meant to be, not servitude, not surrender, but a force that uplifts without breaking you. The disciple returned to the monastery with more than stories. He returned with clarity. He had seen with his own eyes that kindness without balance breeds contempt, but kindness with strength commands respect. And this is where the path bends again, because the question is no longer whether to be kind. It is how to carry kindness with strength through every corner of life. From here, the Master's words turn inward, cutting deeper than any parable. He reveals a truth many refuse to face. Kindness, while noble, is never enough on its own. Without discernment, it bends. Without self-respect, it collapses. Virtue without balance becomes a weight, not a strength. Now, imagine standing before a mirror, not one of glass, but of conscience. The question it throws back is sharper than any insult. Why are you kind? Is it to ease another's suffering, to win approval, to avoid conflict? Each answer tells a different story, and in that story, the motive often matters more than the act. The Stoics pressed this question relentlessly. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "Let not your mind be enslaved by the actions of others, nor your kindness corrupted by weakness. For what good is generosity if its source is fear? What good is compassion if it leaves you hollow?" The mirror does not lie. It reflects the state of your soul, not the mask you present. Think again of the disciple's first attempts. His kindness was genuine, but it was unguarded. He gave, not from strength, but from a hunger to embody virtue. He said yes, not because it was always right, but because he feared that no might mean failing the path. Yet that fear drained him. His endless giving became a quiet self-sacrifice, and sacrifice without wisdom breeds resentment. Resentment turns to exhaustion. Exhaustion turns to silence. And silence, misunderstood, becomes weakness in the eyes of others. At this stage, we see the trap. Many fall into it daily. They confuse martyrdom with virtue. They believe losing themselves is the highest form of giving. But Seneca warned, "To serve without measure is not service but slavery." The truth is hard. To be kind in a way that destroys your own spirit is not noble. It is betrayal of yourself and eventually of those you serve. Here's where the Stoic lesson sharpens. Boundaries are not barriers. They are anchors. They mark where your responsibility ends and another's begins. Without them, kindness spills into chaos. With them, kindness becomes sharper, cleaner, respected. A parent who never says no raises a spoiled child. A leader who never draws a line breeds contempt. A friend who never refuses becomes a shadow, not an equal. Picture this in life. You step into a workplace. One colleague always asks for favors, leaning on your goodwill. You say yes again and again, telling yourself it's easier, it's kinder, it avoids tension. Weeks pass, gratitude fades, expectation takes its place. Soon they do not thank you, they demand you, and you feel the shift. Your kindness has become currency, and its value is now zero. Only when you pause, look them in the eye, and calmly refuse does the balance reset. It is not the refusal that earns respect. It is the respect you finally show yourself. Epictetus once said, "If you wish to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." Applied here, the meaning is clear. If your refusal makes others angry, let them. Their anger exposes not your cruelty, but their dependence. Their protest is proof you have reclaimed control. In that moment, you are not unkind, you are wise. The disciple began to understand this. His kindness had lacked roots. It was a tree that bent too far, ready to snap. But with boundaries, it could bend and not break. His reflection showed him that true kindness uplifts both giver and receiver. Anything else is imbalance, a slow erosion of dignity. So let this be the lesson you carry. Examine not just what you give, but why you give it. Ask whether your kindness springs from courage or from fear. Respect yourself as deeply as you respect others. Because the one who loses himself in giving teaches the world that his life is cheap, and no one respects what is cheap. At this point, the master's guidance grows sharper still. For once the disciple grasped self-awareness. He was ready for the next truth, the hidden power of boundaries and how they transform kindness from a burden into a force of strength. At this stage, the lesson turned sharper. The master spoke not of rivers or forests, but of lines, lines invisible yet undeniable, boundaries. They are not walls to shut others out. They are signals of respect, both for yourself and for those you engage with. When the disciple began to practice this, he saw the truth immediately. Not everyone celebrated his newfound strength. Some grew angry, offended that the servant they once relied on would no longer bend. Others, however, looked at him differently. They stood straighter in his presence. They saw not a man to exploit, but a man to respect. This duality mirrors human nature. People interpret kindness through their own lens. To some, your giving is a light. To others, it is an opening to take. Boundaries are what make the difference. They teach others how to treat you. They declare that your kindness is not duty, but choice, that your worth is not measured by your endless willingness to say yes. Marcus Aurelius warned himself daily, waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one. In this sense, boundaries are not an argument. They are action. They transform kindness from a passive act into an empowered one. Now imagine a life without them. A kindness that only flows outward, never inward. A river that pours itself endlessly until its bed runs dry. What begins as generosity soon becomes exhaustion. And exhaustion, no matter how noble, serves no one. The disciple discovered this as he reflected on his own giving. He realized his kindness could not uplift others if it drained him. Only by protecting his energy could he offer something deeper, something that did not vanish at the first sign of fatigue. By respecting himself, he made his kindness sustainable. By saying no when needed, his yes became heavier with meaning. Here's the balance Stoicism demands. Seneca once wrote, "Nothing is more honorable than a grateful heart." Gratitude is not only for others, it begins within. To give from emptiness is not honorable. To give from strength is. Before offering, pause and ask, am I giving from abundance or from depletion? Does this act create harmony or does it feed dependence? Picture a friend who always leans on you. At first you carry them, thinking it is loyalty. But months pass and your loyalty becomes their excuse to remain weak. They expect it. They depend on it. Then, one day you draw a line. You say calmly, this time you must walk on your own. Anger flashes in their eyes, but beneath that anger lies truth. They never grew because you never allowed them to. By holding the boundary, you offer them the hardest gift, the chance to rise. Epictetus wrote, no man is free who is not master of himself. Boundaries are self-mastery in practice. They free you from being a slave to others' demands. They free others from their own complacency. They create space where respect can grow, where kindness can lift instead of trap. The disciple learned this the hard way, but once he did, the shift was permanent. He understood that his kindness could not be endless self-sacrifice. It had to be measured, guided by reason, guarded by dignity. Only then could it serve as a true force for harmony. So here is the truth. Kindness without boundaries drains you. Kindness with boundaries strengthens you, and strength combined with compassion commands respect. The master's eyes lingered on the disciple as if to press the point deeper. Kindness is not weakness. Boundaries are not cruelty. Together they form a balance, a force that neither breaks nor bends too far. And from here, the teaching deepens once more into the hidden danger of attachment and why even compassion, when chained to expectation, can turn into suffering. Entering the next stage of the journey, the disciple faced the hardest truth of all. His kindness had never been free, it had been chained to expectation. Each time he gave, he secretly longed for approval, for harmony, for acknowledgement. And when those expectations failed, his heart sank into bitterness. What he thought was compassion was in fact a bargain. The master's guidance cut through that illusion. Let go of the need for recognition, he said. Give as yourself, not as a plea for validation. Only then will your kindness be unshaken. The disciple realized that compassion tied to outcome is fragile. It bends under rejection. It breaks under disrespect. But compassion rooted in self-respect stands unshaken. Marcus Aurelius warned himself, do not waste yourself in resentment at ingratitude. True virtue, he knew, must flow from its own source, not from the applause of others. The disciple began to understand, if he wanted his kindness to endure, it had to be released from the chains of approval. Only then could it be pure. From here, he learned the paradox of strength and softness. Softness, when rooted in weakness, dissolves. But softness, anchored in clarity, becomes power. Water, though gentle, shapes mountains. So too can kindness, when guided by wisdom, move through the world with quiet force. Imagine him in the village again. Before he said yes to every demand, hollowing himself out. Now he speaks with balance. Sometimes he offers help with full heart. Other times he says no with equal calm. To his surprise, his compassion does not shrink when he refuses. It grows. Because each act now carries intention. Each gesture now has weight. His no is not cruelty. It is strength that preserves the meaning of his yes. This principle bleeds into every corner of life. In relationships, kindness must not become servitude. In work, generosity must not erase self-worth. In community, compassion must inspire respect, not pity. The Stoics taught that virtue is never passive. It is chosen, tested, sharpened by reason. Seneca wrote, "No man is crushed by misfortune unless he has first been deceived by prosperity." In the same way, no kindness is crushed by rejection unless it was first bound to the illusion of praise. As the disciple reflected, he saw the real battle was within. The disrespect he had suffered was not proof of others' cruelty alone, it was proof of his imbalance. He had offered himself without limit, hoping the world would mirror his sincerity. Instead, the world mirrored his weakness. Only when he stood rooted in self-awareness did others begin to reflect respect back to him. Here lies the inner transformation. What changes first is not the world, but the man who faces it. When he no longer needed recognition, even insult lost its sting. When he no longer sought reward, rejection could not disturb him. His peace came from within, and from that peace his kindness became indestructible. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." Freedom is not in cutting ties to others, but in cutting ties to their approval. To act with clarity, to give with measure, to remain soft yet unbreakable. So pause here and let the image sink in. A river once muddied now runs clear. It still flows, still nourishes, still gives. But it does so with strength beneath its surface, with firmness in its course. This is what kindness must become, an offering, not a plea. The disciple at last began to walk with this balance, softer in spirit, firmer in will. His kindness was no longer a chain but a choice, and in that choice he found both peace and power. This is where the journey turns inward again. For once strength and softness are reconciled, the question remains, how do we carry this balance through the trials of everyday life, where obstacles wait like stones on the path? As we step into this closing chapter, imagine the quiet weight of ordinary choices. You are asked for help. The words rise on your tongue before you even think. Yes, of course. But deep inside, a question lingers. Are you giving from strength, or are you giving from fear? These small moments, easily overlooked, are where the entire balance of kindness is tested. The first lesson is to pause. Do not rush into every act of generosity as if it were demanded by the world. Instead, breathe. Look inward. Ask yourself, is this kindness born of genuine compassion, or is it an attempt to avoid rejection? Am I helping because it is right, or because I am afraid to say no? That single pause separates blind sacrifice from wise giving. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." If your kindness is colored by fear, it weakens you. But if it is colored by clarity, it strengthens both you and those you serve. From here, the disciple was taught the second practice, boundaries. Without them, kindness becomes endless erosion. Boundaries are not walls of stone, but bridges of respect. They show others where your strength begins and ends. They protect your dignity while preserving the dignity of others. Saying no is not cruelty, it is truth spoken calmly. A yes that never rests becomes worthless. But a no delivered with honesty gives weight to every yes that follows. Think of the parent who sets limits for their child. The child may resist, but deep down learns respect. So it is with all human bonds. The third practice runs deeper still, compassion without attachment. To give while clutching at recognition is not giving, it is trading. To expect gratitude is to chain yourself to disappointment. Seneca warned, "He who gives to be repaid has sold, not given." The disciple learned that his early kindness had been poisoned by the need for approval. He longed for harmony, for acknowledgement. When it did not come, he felt wounded. But when he let go, when he gave without expecting applause, his spirit grew lighter. Even insult lost its sting because his actions were no longer tied to the opinions of others. Balance, too, became essential. A river that only flows outward and never replenishes its source will one day dry up. A spirit that only gives without care for itself will collapse. The disciple came to see that nurturing himself was not selfish, it was necessary. A tired body cannot lift another. A weary mind cannot inspire. Just as a soldier sharpens his blade before battle, one must preserve strength to serve well. Self-care is not indulgence, it is maintenance of the vessel that carries all virtue. And then came the union of softness and strength. Kindness is not meant to be brittle, nor is it meant to dissolve into weakness. It must flow like water. Water adapts, yielding to obstacles, yet over time it shapes valleys and carves stone. In choosing when to give, he learned his compassion gained weight. Each act became sharper, cleaner, impossible to twist into weakness. Every act of kindness that remained became deliberate, resilient, impossible to twist into weakness. These are not lessons for a distant monastery. They are lessons for us, here, now. Each of us knows the sting of being used, the fatigue of endless yeses, the hollow silence mistaken for weakness. But these are not signs of failure. They are signs that we must refine our practice. When kindness is guided by wisdom, it ceases to be a burden. It becomes a force that elevates both giver and receiver. The Master's final words burned like iron into the disciple's heart. A tree that bends with the wind does not break, but a tree that bends too much loses its roots. The meaning is clear. Flexibility keeps you alive, but without roots, you are swept away. Let your kindness bend with the world, but never so far that you uproot your dignity. Bend with compassion, stand with wisdom, and so the disciple's story mirrors ours. We have all faced moments when our giving was misunderstood or exploited. Yet these moments are not curses, they are invitations, opportunities to strengthen our balance, to guard our dignity, to anchor compassion in wisdom. The Stoics remind us, power is not in being untouched by the world, but in shaping how we meet it. Let your compassion flow freely, but let it be guided by discernment. Give generously, but give from strength. Guard your roots, and you will stand unbroken. In the balance of softness and strength lies a power no hand can exploit, no storm can uproot. When kindness is guided by wisdom, it stops being a chain and becomes a strength. What you give is seen, and what you protect is respected. If today's message spoke to you, take a moment to subscribe so you can keep walking this path with me. And as a reminder that you stayed until the end, drop a comment with 2 simple words: strong kindness. Let this be your mark of choosing clarity over weakness. Keep moving forward with dignity and be ready for the next step, where we go even deeper into the power of living with balance.